welcome back to Listen Bree. Thank you for watching our channel today. This week's video is kind of a topical study on the topic of contentment and being content, what that looks like, different areas that we need to be content. And a lot of this is from what I've been learning in the book of Philippians. I really dug deep in Philippians like a week, 2 weeks ago, and that was kind of a main theme that stuck out to me from that book of the Bible. So I wanted to just talk about that, and there's also some other cross-references that I have here that I will mention as well. But most of these book verses are from the book of Philippians. And just to give you some context, the book of Philippians was written by the Apostle Paul. Like most of the epistles, the letters, most of them in the New Testament were written by Paul. And if you know anything about Paul, Paul did not have an easy life. Like if we compare his life to like my life or your life, we have it so easy compared to what Paul endured for Christ. But even in the midst of all that, Paul is a great example of a man who was content. He says in a verse that I might read in a minute, he knew how to abound, to have everything he needed, and also how to be abased and to not have everything that we would think is a necessity, but he knew how to live both ways, and he had joy, and he was content in all circumstances. So there's a lot of different ways that, different areas of different ways we could be content, different areas we should be content in. We need to be content in like our physical possessions, like what we have, what we want, that we're not being jealous or envious of what other people have. We need to be content in our relationship status, whether it's relationships with your family and you're not content with where that is, or relationship status as in you want a boyfriend, you don't have a boyfriend, or things like that. You're going through a season of singleness or a bad relationship. It's easy to not be content with the season of life we're in. Past relationships, just like where we're in college or what we're doing in high school, or we have these dreams, these things we want to do, and we just can't do them right now. That's another area. And the last one I thought of is being content with our bodies and our personality and our identity and who we are. And I think all of those are areas that most of us can relate to. And some of these verses kind of target specific areas, but a lot of this you could take any way, anything that you're dealing with that you're struggling to be content about. Most of these verses could speak to that situation. So I have just a few thoughts I want to share about being content. The first one is that to be content, you have to be selfless. And again, going back to the example of the Apostle Paul, he was a very selfless person. So one example in the book of Philippians chapter 4, verses 17 and 18, he's talking about how the Philippians gave him a gift to help provide for him. And let me read verse 17 and 18. It says, "Not because I desire a gift, but I desire fruit that may abound to your account. I have all and abound. I am full, having received of Epaphroditus the things which were sent from you, an odor of a sweet smell, a sacrifice acceptable, well-pleasing to God." So the church at Philippi sent him a gift, and he was very appreciative of it, but he was very selfless. He wasn't saying, well, thank you for this gift, I definitely need it, please send as much as you can. He's saying, I'm thankful that you sent it so that you have rewards in heaven, so that fruit will abound to your account, is what he says. So contentment, we have to be selfless. We can't be thinking of ourselves, because then we will never be content. If Paul was just thinking, oh, these people, I'm doing so much for these churches, they need to send me more money, or they need to do this or that for me, he would never be content no matter how much they gave him, if that was his mindset, but it wasn't. And another thing is that we need to think about eternity. When part of being selfless, another side of it is dying to ourselves. And in 1 Timothy, which is another book written by Paul, in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6, starting in verse 6, it says, "But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. And having food and raiment, let us therewith be content." So Paul is saying, we want all this stuff here on this earth, but that doesn't last. We should be content because we can think of eternity and focus on those things later and not on what's happening now. We need to die to ourselves and the pleasures that we want and really focus on eternity and what's actually going to matter. The second thing involved with contentment is trust. And in order to be content with where we're at, a lot of times we have to trust God. We have to trust that He's going to provide for us. Paul had to trust God. He didn't have a house. He wasn't earning an income necessarily. So he was really trusting God to provide for him, and God would. He says later that God will supply all your needs. So needs might be different for God than what we think of as needs, but God does promise He will give us what we need, and He knows what we need. We have to trust that God is in control. So if we're not content with this season of life we're in, or with our relationship status right now, we need to be reminded that God is still in control. He knows what's best for us, and the Bible promises He is with us. Hebrews 13:5. The beginning of the verse is less common, but let me read that to you. Hebrews 13:5 says, "And be content with such things as ye have, for He hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee." So we can be content because we know that God is in control, and we need to let go of what we think we need and just trust God for the future, trust Him for our relationships and whatever is happening in our life, because He knows our needs. He knows us better than we know ourselves, and He is in control of all things. The third thing to remember is that contentment is not contingent on our circumstances. And I know this is something we hear a lot, probably, but it's important to remember. A big topic in Philippians is the topic of joy, having joy, rejoicing in the Lord. It says it continually. Philippians 3:1 and Philippians 4:4, that's the one we hear a lot. Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. And we can do that when we're trusting in God. We can still rejoice no matter what the circumstances. And that was the amazing thing about Paul's testimony and Paul's example, is that he did not have easy circumstances, and yet he still was content. Like, way more content than me, and I have much easier circumstances. So this is a very convicting topic for me. I think it's something that, there's always something that we're not content with. Everywhere and in all things, I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. So those two verses written by Paul to the church at Philippi are saying, I'm going through all these different circumstances, but I am learning, God is teaching me to be content in whatever state I am, wherever I am, whatever is happening to me at that time. And all of those things, I could be having all the food I need. I might not have all the food I need, but I'm going to be content anyway. And that's something that we should pray about and ask God to help us to have that attitude of being content. Most of the time for us, it's not a matter of having enough food. It might be a matter of, letting go of something we really want, or just surrendering it to God and saying, if you want me to have this, then I'm going to let you do that in your time and in your way. I also wanted to point out with these circumstances is in some of the verses, I'm not going to read them all, but Paul basically says we need to rejoice because we always have something to be joyful about, and that is salvation. We can always rejoice in the Lord, no matter what the circumstances. We can rejoice and be grateful for that salvation, that great gift that He's given us. And no matter what's happening, that's never going to go away. So that's one of the reasons that we can always be joyful. We can always have something to rejoice in because of what Christ has done for us. And the last thing I want to mention about contentment is that it is only possible through Christ. And I just read Philippians 4:11 and 12, and most of you know the verse that comes directly after that. So 11 and 12 of chapter 4, I just read it. It's talking about being content in whatever situation we're in. Now, part of that same passage, the very next verse, Philippians 4:13, it says, I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. And a lot of times that verse is used for a lot of different things, sometimes out of context, sometimes in context, but really this verse is saying we need to rely on Christ, and whatever circumstance we're in, we can endure that, we can be content and have joy through that because Christ is giving us strength. And we can find our contentment and joy in Him. And because contentment comes from strength from the Lord, then contentment is something that the world does not have. It's something that they can't really fully understand. And, they're seeking after these things that, look great here, but they're not going to last for eternity. So I think people who are content, they really stick out. I can think of some people in my church and my family who I would say are very content. And I think that is such a neat example and a beautiful testimony to their faith. And when the world sees that, they see somebody living content and joyful no matter what's happening, that says a lot about your testimony. And that might get them interested about your faith. And I think that would be such a neat way for someone to see your faith in action is through how you are content, and in whatever circumstance you are, you can still find joy. Contentment is such a big deal, and I feel like it's a great topic for right now with the holiday seasons coming up. Obviously, Thanksgiving is a lot about being grateful, being thankful. Contentment kind of fits in there. Just being joyful right where we are and thankful no matter what's happening, and being able to find joy and thank the Lord for that situation. And then also with Christmas, I know it's one of the times where a lot of us could get the least content because there's so many things that the world is saying we need. There's so many things that, we see so much, just social media and commercials and shopping and all of that. And I think it's just really good to remind ourselves that we have all we need in Christ, and that He supplies all our needs, and we just need to trust in Him and rely on Him for contentment and for joy in whatever circumstances we're in.